The 12 signs God is healing your pain. When you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, pain has a way of silencing everything around us. You kneel down, you try to pray, but all you hear is nothing. Not a word, not a whisper. Just the weight of your own sorrow echoing back at you. And in that silence, something inside starts to ask, has God forgotten me? If you've ever felt this, if you've ever clutched a rosary in your hand, heart trembling with questions, tears on the edge of falling, then this message is for you. Because what if the silence wasn't absence, but presence? What if that stillness was the beginning of something sacred? Not a punishment, not abandonment, but the gentle arrival of healing that's deeper than words. Every time we pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, something shifts in the invisible, not always in lightning and thunder, but in whispers, in stillness, in moments that feel like nothing is happening, yet everything is changing. In this journey, we're going to walk through 12 signs that your pain is not just being seen, but being healed. And not in dramatic ways that the world claps for, but in sacred ways your soul will recognize. These signs may not be loud, but they are real. And if you've been faithful in your suffering, even when it felt pointless, you might already be living one of them right now. Sometimes healing looks like joy. Other times, it looks like surviving the day without collapsing. Sometimes, it sounds like praise. But often, it's the choice to stay one more moment in the silence. Trusting God is doing something. The Divine Mercy Chaplet is not just a prayer. It is a doorway. And when you pray it with a heart that's broken but willing, something eternal touches what's wounded in you. The scars don't vanish instantly, but they begin to glow with meaning. And slowly, your pain begins to breathe again. So take a breath. Hold that rosary tight. Open your heart. Because these are the 12 ways God may already be healing you. And maybe, just maybe, this video will help you see what your soul already knows. Let's begin. When the silence feels sacred, not empty, something unseen is shifting within you. In the beginning, silence during prayer feels unbearable. It feels like a wall, like heaven is shut tight, like your voice is lost in a void where no one is listening. You cry out, beg for relief, and the silence answers with nothing. Not even a breeze, not a feeling, just stillness. And your heart wonders, where is God? But what if that very silence is the first sign that God is drawing near? Not in the ways we expect. Not with instant answers or sudden emotions, but in a deeper, quieter way. Because silence, true, holy silence, is never empty. It's full of presence, full of divine attention, full of a kind of love that is too deep for noise. When you begin to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet regularly, you may not notice it at first. You may say the words by habit, feeling disconnected, numb. But over time, as your soul adjusts to the frequency of mercy, that silence begins to feel different. It's no longer hostile. It's no longer empty. It becomes a place you return to, not to escape the world, but to encounter something more real than the world itself. God's mercy doesn't always make a sound. Sometimes it just surrounds you. Like a still ocean with no wind, like a church with no voices, like the hush right before a miracle. And that silence, the one you feared, starts to feel like shelter. You sit in it, not demanding answers, but breathing. And somehow, even without a single spoken word, you know He's there. This is not about feelings. You might not feel peace. You might not feel joy. You might not feel anything at all, but you begin to notice that you no longer feel abandoned. you start to understand that God is not always loud. That sometimes His love arrives like light in a sealed room, quiet but real. You start to hear silence, not as a void, but as a voice without words. A voice that speaks directly to your soul. You'll realize this shift has happened when you stop filling every moment of prayer with words. When you can sit with the rosary in your hands and not say anything, and it feels okay. When your spirit becomes still without forcing it. When you're not waiting for an answer anymore, but resting in the reality that He is enough, even in the silence. And there's something mysterious here, because as the silence becomes sacred, it starts to heal you. Not like a medicine that removes pain, but like a presence that makes the pain bearable. You begin to understand that God is not fixing you from a distance. He is sitting with you, listening to every unspoken ache, witnessing every battle inside your heart. You realize you're not waiting for Him to show up. He's already here. That's what the Divine Mercy Chaplet does. It trains your soul to recognize presence even when your mind doesn't. It teaches your heart to trust even when it's bruised. And it reintroduces you to a kind of love that doesn't need to prove itself through noise. One day, you'll be praying in that same silence you once feared, and tears will come. Not from pain, but from peace. A peace that doesn't answer your questions, but holds them gently. A peace that doesn't remove your scars, but fills them with meaning. A peace that doesn't shout, "You are healed," but whispers, "You were never alone." When the silence becomes sacred, you'll know God has already started healing your pain. Not with lightning, not with words, but with mercy deeper than anything this world can give. And you'll stop looking for proof, because you've already found presence. When the pain begins to teach you, not torture you, something fundamental is changing in the way your soul understands suffering. At first, pain feels cruel. It crashes in like a storm without warning, wrecking the fragile structures you built inside yourself. Hopes, routines, plans, prayers unanswered. It stings because it's real. You wake up with it. You fall asleep with it. It clings to your chest like a weight you can't explain to anyone. And worse, it makes you feel like you've done something wrong, as if your pain were punishment, as if you were forgotten. But then, through the daily repetition of the Divine Mercy Chaplet, something strange begins to unfold. The prayer doesn't erase the pain, but it starts to give it shape. It's no longer a wall, it becomes a mirror. Instead of shouting, "Why me?" you start to hear a quieter question inside your heart. What is God showing me in this? And that's the turning point. That's when pain starts to teach, not in a way that makes it easy, but in a way that makes it meaningful. The Chaplet of Divine Mercy isn't just a request for relief. It becomes a lens, a sacred lens that shows you how your suffering, as unbearable as it feels, might be the doorway to a deeper healing, not just of your emotions, but of your soul. You begin to notice patterns. The people who used to hurt you now appear smaller in your mind. The failures that once haunted you now feel like places God allowed to collapse so He could rebuild. The words of Jesus to Saint Faustina, "The greater the misery, the greater the right to my mercy," don't sound poetic anymore. They sound like lifelines. And in that moment, your pain is no longer the enemy. It's the guide, the teacher, the one pointing to a transformation already underway. You begin to see how the pain revealed your false dependencies, how it stripped away illusions, how it forced you to pray not because it was scheduled, but because there was nowhere else to go. And it was there, on your knees, crying over the same wound for the 100th time, that you began to feel something different. Not escape, not comfort, but clarity. This is what divine mercy does. It enters the cracks. It whispers into your broken places that nothing is wasted. Not even this. Especially not this. And one day, while praying that same familiar rhythm, for the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world, you'll feel your own sorrow take on a strange beauty. Not because you love pain, but because you finally understand that God has never stopped using it to bring you home. You may still cry, you may still ache, but beneath the grief, you start to notice something unexpected. Wisdom. Insights that weren't there before. Strength that wasn't there before. Compassion that you didn't know your heart could hold. And when you look in the mirror, you realize that your pain hasn't destroyed you. It has refined you. You don't forget what hurt you. You just stop being owned by it. You begin to see how God has been turning suffering into sanctification. And that's not just healing. That's transformation. That's the quiet miracle of divine mercy in motion, not rescuing you from your humanity, but restoring your divinity within it. That's when you know. Your pain no longer tortures. It teaches. And through it, God is making something eternal in you. When you start feeling God's timing instead of your own, something within you has surrendered, even if you didn't realize it. In the beginning, you pray because you're desperate. You cry out with urgency, expecting movement, expecting relief. Every day feels like a countdown. Every delay feels like rejection. Your prayers become deadlines. You give God a schedule. You ask, and when nothing changes, you wonder if your faith is weak, or worse, if He's not listening at all. But slowly, something begins to shift, not in your circumstances, but in your spirit. As you pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet day after day, something mysterious happens. Not to your body, not to your bank account, not to the people around you. It happens to your perception of time. It's subtle at first. You stop measuring your healing by the clock. You stop comparing your journey to other people's. You begin to breathe a little deeper, even when nothing makes sense. And in that stillness, you realize something divine. God is not late. He's not on pause. He's not ignoring you. He's preparing something that requires you to wait. Not because you're forgotten, but because what's coming must arrive in fullness, not fragments. You used to think delay meant denial. Now you understand delay can be protection. You used to beg God to hurry. Now you thank Him for every door He didn't let you walk through too soon. There's no formula for this realization. It's not a doctrine. It's not a theological debate. It's a moment that hits you in the middle of prayer, when you feel peace even though the answer hasn't arrived. That peace, that trust in timing, is the evidence of healing. You begin to see that urgency was never from God. It was from fear, and fear was never the voice of the Holy Spirit. It was the echo of wounds trying to control the outcome. The chaplet teaches your soul to move at the speed of mercy. And mercy doesn't rush. It restores. You don't lose your desire. You don't become numb. You just stop forcing the story. You stop gripping so tightly to your own timeline. You begin to pray, not to demand, but to align. And that alignment changes everything. You wake up one morning and realize you're not watching the clock anymore. You're watching the signs. You're not checking your phone for miracles. You're checking your heart for softness, for readiness, for joy that doesn't depend on having what you asked for. That's how you know. God is healing your need to control. He's removing the anxiety attached to unanswered prayers. He's teaching you that His mercy is not a reaction, it's a rhythm. And when you move in rhythm with mercy, you begin to sense something powerful. The weight is not empty. The weight is sacred. You stop asking, "When will it come?" and start praying, "Let it come when I'm ready." You stop thinking God is late. You start seeing that He's been working in layers, not just in outcomes. And the more you let go of your own deadlines, the more space you give Him to move in ways you never imagined. This is where transformation becomes visible, not because everything changes on the outside, but because everything slows down on the inside. You're no longer racing time, you're trusting eternity. And when you reach that point, even if you're still waiting, even if the situation hasn't changed, you know something has. Because you're not afraid of waiting anymore. That's when God's timing becomes your own. And that's when healing has truly begun. When you sense a battle has ended without a sound, you begin to notice subtle shifts that are almost imperceptible. At first, your struggles feel constant, as though every day is a battlefield. Some battles are visible: conflicts with people, challenges at work, family tension. Others are invisible: wounds from the past, fears that whisper, sins that weigh heavily on your conscience. You fight them with prayer, with effort, with tears, and it feels like progress is slow or non-existent. You wonder if your spiritual armor is strong enough, or if you are even moving at all. Then one day, without announcement or fanfare, something changes. You may not even notice at first. You wake up and feel lighter. You pray the same prayers you always have, but the heaviness doesn't press down in the same way. Situations that once triggered anxiety no longer have the same grip. You might encounter someone who used to provoke anger or resentment, and your response is calm, even gentle. The shift is quiet, but undeniable. The battle has been won, even though no trumpet sounded. This is one of the most mysterious signs of divine mercy at work. God does not always fight your battles with visible miracles. Sometimes He works silently, removing chains, releasing fear, and dissolving doubts in ways that are subtle but powerful. The chaplet becomes more than repetition. It becomes a conduit for unseen spiritual warfare, for victory that occurs in the hidden depths of your soul. You may look around and see no change in your circumstances, but internally, something has broken free. The storm that raged inside you is now calm. You may notice a freedom in thought or emotion. A past wound that haunted you no longer triggers the same pain. A relationship that caused suffering feels lighter, not because it changed, but because God has shifted your heart. You begin to recognize patterns that once enslaved you, negative thoughts, fears, compulsions, and realize you can face them without panic or despair. The spiritual battle has ended quietly, but decisively. The chains that bound your mind, heart, or spirit are no longer binding. This silent victory is a profound marker of healing, a signal that God has intervened, not with noise or spectacle, but with mercy, patience, and precise timing. Even your dreams may reflect this victory. Nightmares may fade, leaving room for visions of peace and restoration. You may find yourself instinctively choosing grace over reaction, forgiveness over resentment, calm over fear. These subtle shifts are the invisible fruits of God's mercy. You may not have seen the battle commence, nor the tactics He employed, but the outcome is undeniable. The heaviness lifts. The chains are gone. Silence itself becomes a witness to divine action. And the most remarkable aspect is that you may never fully comprehend how it happened. God's work in your life often escapes human observation. The silence is sacred. It is the space in which He performs miracles that are far greater than we can imagine. Through persistent prayer, especially the Divine Mercy Chaplet, you have unknowingly participated in your own liberation. Each Hail Mary, each invocation of mercy, has been a tool in the dismantling of what held you captive. And now, without any visible fanfare, your spirit is free. The battle has ended, quietly, invisibly, divinely. When you begin to protect your peace like it's sacred, you start noticing a shift in how you interact with the world around you. Before, your peace was fragile, easily disturbed by opinions, criticism, or circumstances outside your control. Arguments, unexpected challenges, and even casual comments had the power to destabilize your inner calm. Every day felt like a negotiation with chaos, as if your emotional well-being depended on external validation or control. You prayed for relief, but the same disturbances returned, leaving you exhausted and questioning your ability to remain centered. Then, through consistent prayer of the Divine Mercy Chaplet, your soul starts to develop discernment. You begin to recognize what nourishes your spirit and what drains it. Without consciously realizing it, you start creating boundaries, not as walls of isolation, but as spaces of sacred preservation. You refuse to engage in negativity that does not serve your growth. You begin to step away from conflicts that once felt unavoidable, not from fear, but from understanding. Protecting your peace becomes an act of reverence toward the work God is doing inside you. It becomes an acknowledgement that the healing you are receiving is delicate and valuable, and that you are responsible for tending it carefully. This protection of peace is not just emotional. It manifests physically, spiritually, and mentally. Your choices reflect a prioritization of quietude and divine connection over reaction. You notice how easily certain past triggers no longer provoke anxiety or fear. You begin to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because the act releases tension that could disrupt your internal sanctuary. Every time you choose silence over argument, patience over irritation, reflection over judgment, you reinforce the sacredness of the space God is cultivating within you. There is a subtle but profound indicator here. The more you protect your peace, the more you sense God's presence. It is as if the boundaries you set make room for His mercy to settle deeper into your soul. External circumstances may not have changed, yet internally a new rhythm emerges. You find moments of stillness where before there was turmoil. You discover that your soul is no longer at the mercy of every disturbance, and you can remain centered even amid chaos. This conscious guarding of peace signals that healing is taking root, transforming how you respond to life itself. You will notice small but powerful shifts. Your morning prayer may feel longer, richer, or more meaningful. Conversations that once drained you now leave you energized or indifferent. Conflicts may arise, yet they no longer penetrate the serenity you have cultivated. Your focus shifts from controlling outcomes to nurturing internal harmony. It becomes clear that this peace is not earned by circumstance, but is a gift cultivated by prayer, by conscious surrender, and by allowing divine mercy to reshape the patterns of your mind and heart. As you continue, protecting your peace becomes a spiritual discipline. It is not rigid or legalistic, but intentional and responsive. Every choice to preserve your serenity reinforces the healing process. You start to realize that this sacred peace is both a shield and a sanctuary. It shields you from the relentless noise of life and sanctifies your inner world. It is a testament to the transformation taking place quietly within. This is one of the most profound signs that God is healing your pain. your desire to maintain this inner sanctuary, not as a selfish act, but as recognition of the sacred work being done in your soul. When your tears no longer mean defeat, you begin to experience a profound shift in how you process emotion. At first, tears feel like surrender. They are evidence of weakness, of being overwhelmed, of failing to control the chaos inside your heart. You cry because pain is too heavy, grief too sharp, or prayer seems unanswered. Each tear carries the weight of disappointment, loneliness, and longing. You wonder if God sees, if God cares, if these tears will ever become anything more than a silent confession of suffering. But as you persevere in praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, a remarkable transformation occurs. Tears no longer represent failure. They become a sacred language of release and connection. Each drop that falls is a dialogue with the divine, a testimony that your soul is alive and responsive. You begin to realize that crying is not the end of resilience. It is a vessel for healing, a bridge that carries pain into mercy. The act itself signals that something within you is being moved, touched, and transformed, even when it feels invisible. You notice that your crying becomes less chaotic and more intentional. It is no longer accompanied by panic or despair. You sit with your sorrow, whispering the prayers you have learned, and the tears flow with a sense of purpose. They are no longer messy or scattered. They are precise, like the water that cleanses a wound. With each prayer, your tears become part of the process of restoration, a physical manifestation of God's mercy settling in your heart. You feel release, not loss, surrender, not abandonment. Over time, you see patterns in how your tears respond. They arise at moments when your heart needs attention, when grief needs acknowledgement, or when old wounds require gentle care. Each cry becomes a marker of progress, a sign that healing is unfolding. You start to trust your tears, understanding that they are a sacred instrument, not a sign of weakness. This shift transforms the very experience of suffering. Pain is no longer a chain that binds you. It becomes a teacher, and your tears are the language through which the lessons are received. As this practice deepens, you may find that you are crying for reasons you cannot fully articulate: gratitude, relief, awe, or even quiet joy. The chaplet opens a space where your emotional landscape can breathe freely. You discover that tears are a sign of alignment with God's presence, a signal that your soul is engaging with something larger than your personal struggle. The act of crying becomes a partnership with divine mercy, a sacred ritual in which vulnerability is honored and nurtured. Eventually, tears no longer frighten you. They no longer carry the sting of shame or fear. They are proof that God is present, that His mercy is active, and that your pain is being transformed from burden into passage. Each tear is a thread weaving a tapestry of resilience and grace. You begin to understand that healing is not always loud or immediate. It is often gentle, silent, and fluid, moving through the very waterways of your emotion. Your tears become not a surrender to suffering, but a conduit for divine healing. In this way, your crying changes from an act of defeat into a signal of hope. It is proof that God is not distant, that your prayers are alive, and that the Divine Mercy Chaplet is a channel through which your wounds are being tended. Tears are no longer a symbol of despair. They are a language of progress, a reflection of your heart opening to receive the mercy that transforms, restores, and sustains you. Through this, you realize that your most human expressions are being sanctified, turning what once seemed like weakness into a profound testament of divine healing. When you stop needing signs and start trusting the silence, your entire approach to prayer begins to shift. At first, You seek evidence. You want confirmation, a nudge, a visible miracle to reassure you that God is listening. You pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet and watch for answers, for feelings, for circumstances to change. Every unanswered prayer makes your heart restless. Every day that passes without clarity feels like a test you might fail. You begin to rely on signs to validate your faith, as if God's love could only be measured by what you can see or feel. Then something subtle happens. Over time, as you continue praying faithfully, even when the world offers no signs, your heart begins to settle in the silence. You realize that absence of evidence is not absence of presence. God does not always communicate through visible outcomes. Sometimes He works quietly, shaping your soul, shifting your spirit, and guiding your steps without announcing Himself. You begin to trust that His mercy is present in every unremarkable moment, in the mundane routines of life, in the stillness you once feared. This trust is not passive, it is active surrender. You stop measuring the worth of your prayers by immediate results. You begin to notice a steady undercurrent of peace, a sense that your intentions, your devotion, and your prayers are being received, even if nothing changes externally. The chaplet becomes not a request for proof, but a means of alignment. It trains your soul to dwell in mercy, to recognize God's presence in spaces you once overlooked. The silence itself becomes sacred, a canvas where healing is painted slowly and deliberately. Gradually, you recognize patterns that are not dramatic but meaningful. Your anxiety lessens without explanation. Your heart is more patient, your mind clearer, your decisions more guided by conscience than fear. Even though you cannot point to a specific sign, the effects accumulate. The unseen work of God manifests in your ability to endure, to forgive, to love, and to remain centered in adversity. Trust replaces the need for validation. Faith replaces doubt. You begin to understand that God's healing does not always require spectacles. Sometimes it demands patience, humility, and the courage to accept His timing and methods. The power of trusting the silence lies in its transformative effect. It reshapes your perception of suffering. You begin to see that healing is not always an event, but a process. You learn to rest in God's care, rather than in constant observation of outcomes. Each recitation of the chaplet reinforces this trust. Each repetition of mercy awakens your heart to a reality that transcends immediate perception. You start to realize that you have been walking in God's grace all along, even when your mind could not detect it. Eventually, you reach a point where the absence of visible signs is no longer troubling. Silence itself becomes proof. A quiet awareness of mercy, a gentle assurance that God is active and attentive, suffices. You carry peace with you that is not dependent on circumstance, a trust that is resilient because it is rooted in divine constancy. You stop searching for signs because your soul has recognized the source behind all things, the steadfast presence of God's mercy, flowing endlessly, even when unseen. This is the moment when true healing begins to solidify, not through dramatic gestures or overt miracles, but through internal alignment, spiritual maturity, and a growing sense of serenity. You no longer pray for signs, you pray for presence. And in that shift, the Divine Mercy Chaplet achieves its most profound effect. It moves your soul from dependence on the visible to trust in the eternal, turning silence into sanctuary and faith into deep, abiding peace. When your heart softens without explanation, you start noticing a subtle transformation in the way you respond to life. At first, your heart feels hardened. Pain, betrayal, and disappointment have built walls that protect you from further harm. You approach relationships cautiously, guarding every word and every feeling. Even prayer can feel mechanical, an effort to connect when your spirit is reluctant to trust. Emotional openness seems dangerous, and vulnerability is something you avoid. You pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet seeking comfort, yet the walls remain. Over time, however, something changes without fanfare. You begin to notice that the edges of your heart are not as sharp. Experiences that would have provoked anger or resentment now pass through without leaving their mark. Moments of patience and compassion arise spontaneously, often when you least expect them. The prayers you recite in the chaplet start to work quietly, softening your interior rigidity. You feel a tenderness growing that is independent of circumstances, unprompted by praise or recognition. It is mercy manifesting inside you, slowly but unmistakably. This softening does not happen because external situations become easier or more just. It happens because your soul has begun to receive grace. You find yourself empathizing with those who previously provoked frustration. You forgive in ways that feel effortless, not forced. Your reactions are measured, gentle, and often surprising to you. It is as if the Divine Mercy Chaplet has been reshaping your heart, not by removing trials, but by transforming the way your heart holds them. Pain remains, but it no longer dictates your emotional responses. You notice that your own judgments of self become kinder. Mistakes and shortcomings are met with understanding rather than self-condemnation. The compassion you extend outward mirrors the grace you now experience inward. This is one of the most profound indicators that God is healing. Your heart becomes a vessel for mercy itself. The hardness that once protected you from suffering now yields, and in its yielding, a deeper strength emerges. You are not weaker. You are refined, capable of holding both pain and love without breaking. The subtle beauty of this change is that it feels unearned. You do not act with calculation or strategy. The gentleness arises naturally. The chaplet has trained your soul to respond to life with softness, showing that healing is not only about relief from suffering, but about transformation in how you carry it. You may begin to notice that even strangers elicit compassion, that conflicts resolve with less friction, and that your presence brings calm rather than tension. Your heart, once guarded, now radiates mercy without conscious effort. This unexpected softening also allows you to receive God's love in new ways. When your defenses are lowered, grace fills the spaces that were previously closed off. Healing becomes experiential, not theoretical. You begin to feel the depth of divine mercy acting within you, in ways that cannot be fully articulated, but that you sense in quiet moments, in prayer, and in interactions with the world. Life still presents challenges, but they no longer crush you. Your heart has learned a new rhythm, a cadence of mercy that flows inward first and then outward naturally. Ultimately, this softening is a signal that God is reshaping not just your circumstances, but the very core of your being. Pain is still present, yet your heart carries it with resilience and grace. You recognize that healing is not about escaping difficulty, but about evolving in response to it. The Divine Mercy Chaplet does not merely comfort. It cultivates a heart that can withstand suffering and remain tender, that can carry love even when the world pressures you toward hardness, and that can reflect mercy even in the absence of human recognition. This is a profound, unseen, and deeply spiritual sign that your soul is being healed. When you're no longer afraid of remembering the past, a quiet courage begins to emerge inside you. At first, memories are sharp, heavy, and intrusive. They replay mistakes, regrets, and losses with vivid clarity. Every recollection brings tension, anxiety, or sorrow. You may avoid prayer because the past feels too raw, and even when you kneel with the Divine Mercy Chaplet, your mind drifts to old wounds, unresolved conflicts, and the what-ifs that haunt you. The past feels like a cage, and fear keeps you locked inside, unable to fully surrender to God's mercy. As you persist in praying the chaplet, however, a subtle shift occurs. The past loses its power to paralyze. You begin to notice that remembering does not automatically trigger panic or shame. Instead, memories appear as neutral witnesses, opportunities to see how God's mercy has been working quietly all along. The prayer creates a space where the past can be observed without fear. You are no longer hiding from your history. You are engaging with it in a sacred dialogue, inviting God's presence to illuminate and transform it. This freedom to recall past experiences without dread is a profound sign of healing. You may discover that emotions you once suppressed, grief, guilt, regret, can be faced without being overwhelmed. You are able to reflect on your life's events with clarity and, gradually, with compassion toward yourself and others. Situations that once seemed like permanent scars begin to reveal lessons, growth, or hidden mercies. The chaplet opens channels for divine intervention in the memories themselves, softening their impact and releasing the hold they had on your heart. You might notice that forgiveness becomes easier, not just for others, but for yourself. Actions you once judged harshly are reframed in light of God's love. Decisions that led to pain are understood as part of a greater plan, not as proof of failure. The fear that once accompanied remembrance fades, replaced by a sense of spiritual security and inner stability. Your past is no longer a source of anxiety, but a terrain where mercy can flourish. As this healing deepens, you may find yourself speaking about your past openly in prayer or conversation, without shame or hesitation. The stories that once caused you to cringe now remind you of resilience and divine accompaniment. Each recollection becomes an opportunity to recognize God's presence at work, even in moments of confusion or despair. Healing in this sense is not about erasing memory, but about transforming your relationship with it, allowing the Divine Mercy Chaplet to guide your heart toward understanding, acceptance, and peace. Eventually, remembering becomes an act of liberation rather than confinement. You are free to look back without being trapped, to acknowledge what was painful without being overwhelmed, and to recognize the threads of mercy woven through your experiences. This courage to face your history without fear is a sacred signal. Your soul is moving from trauma toward restoration, from anxiety toward trust, and from despair toward hope. The past is no longer a shadow over your prayers, but a testimony to the unseen work of God healing you from the inside out. When gratitude becomes a reflex, not a ritual, you begin to experience a profound transformation in the way your heart perceives life. Initially, gratitude feels forced. You recite thankfulness as part of routine prayer, repeating words without emotion, as though performing a duty rather than truly feeling. Life may still feel heavy, and each day may present challenges that seem unfair or relentless. The Divine Mercy Chaplet might be recited with sincerity, but the depth of thanks feels distant, abstract, or even mechanical. You want to feel it, but it remains out of reach. Gradually, as you continue praying the chaplet, a subtle but undeniable shift occurs. Gratitude begins to emerge spontaneously. It is no longer tied to circumstances, achievements, or visible blessings. Instead, it flows naturally from the heart, rising even in moments of difficulty. A quiet awareness surfaces. Life itself, with all its trials and imperfections, becomes a source of recognition for God's mercy. You start noticing small acts of grace throughout your day. A smile from a stranger, a moment of unexpected peace, a memory that brings comfort. And each of these becomes an unprompted expression of thankfulness. This reflexive gratitude signals a deeper transformation. You begin to see that the Divine Mercy Chaplet is doing more than teaching you to pray. It is reprogramming your soul to respond to life with awareness and appreciation. Challenges that once caused frustration or despair now elicit quiet acceptance because you recognize them as opportunities for growth, lessons wrapped in love, or moments in which God's presence can be felt, even without dramatic proof. Gratitude no longer requires conscious effort. It becomes a natural orientation of the heart toward mercy. Over time, this shift expands beyond personal emotion. You may find yourself expressing thanks to others, offering patience, encouragement, or kindness without calculating benefit. Your interactions are colored by an underlying recognition of God's work in every person and every situation. Even setbacks are reframed as part of a larger divine tapestry. Life is no longer a series of trials to endure, but a field in which mercy is continuously revealed and celebrated, often quietly, often imperceptibly to the world, but unmistakably to your soul. The profound beauty of reflexive gratitude is that it reinforces healing. When you spontaneously acknowledge God's presence, you strengthen your awareness of mercy at work in your life. This inner rhythm, gratitude as a reflex, signals a soul no longer defined by suffering alone, but by the constant recognition of divine intervention, subtle and pervasive. Pain has not vanished, but its dominance has diminished, replaced by an inner harmony rooted in appreciation and trust. Eventually, your heart carries a readiness to see blessings without prompting. Each day becomes a prayer lived, not just recited. You find yourself thanking God even in moments when logic cannot identify reason for joy. This spontaneous, reflexive gratitude is one of the clearest signs that healing is no longer an event. It is a process, internal and ongoing. The Divine Mercy Chaplet has moved beyond ritual into the fabric of your being, shaping a soul that experiences life through the lens of mercy, faith, and profound appreciation. Gratitude becomes the heartbeat of your healing, constant, natural, and transformative. When you feel carried, not just heard, you begin to experience a level of spiritual support that goes beyond understanding or explanation. At first, praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet may feel like sending your pleas into the void. You speak, you weep, you pour out your heart, and sometimes it seems as if your prayers vanish into nothing. You may feel heard in the sense that words are spoken, but the weight remains heavy, unrelieved, as if God is distant, watching without intervening. The burden of life still presses down, and faith can feel like fragile endurance. Then, gradually, something changes. You start noticing subtle indications that you are not merely being observed, but carried. The challenges you once faced alone feel lighter. You encounter moments of clarity in decision-making, serenity in situations that once provoked panic, and the quiet courage to endure trials without crumbling. This is not always dramatic. There is no trumpet, no sudden lifting of all troubles. But there is a sense that an unseen presence is bearing what you cannot. You sense strength infused into your spirit, the kind of support that does not remove struggle, but gives you the capacity to endure it. Feeling carried manifests in both inner and outer ways. Internally, anxiety diminishes. The past no longer grips you with unrelenting force. Emotions stabilize. You notice patience where there was once irritability, compassion where there was bitterness, and hope where there was despair. Externally, situations that would have overwhelmed you are met with resilience you did not know you had. This capacity is not simply your own, it is mercy at work within you. Each repetition of the chaplet channels the presence of God into the spaces of your life where human strength is insufficient, creating a sense of being lifted even when no visible change occurs. The significance of this shift is profound. Being carried does not mean the absence of challenges. It means the ability to navigate them without being crushed. Your prayers, your sorrow, your struggles are acknowledged in a tangible way by the divine, and the weight of life becomes bearable not by human effort, but by the infusion of God's mercy. You begin to trust that the unseen hand you cannot feel directly is steadying you, guiding your steps, sustaining your heart when it is weakest. This sense of being carried also cultivates humility and surrender. You understand that strength is not always cultivated through effort alone, but through reception. You start accepting help from God in ways that feel intimate and deeply personal. Each repetition of the chaplet becomes a reminder that you do not walk alone. There is a divine presence that engages with your pain at a level far beyond comprehension. Your heart relaxes into this reality, and slowly, quietly, healing becomes experiential. You are no longer merely praying. You are living within God's mercy, supported in ways that transcend human perception. The profound truth of this stage of healing is that it transforms endurance into partnership with God. You are not abandoned in your suffering. You are not merely listened to. You are carried, sustained, and strengthened. This is a spiritual sign that your pain is being attended to in dimensions beyond what you can see or understand, and that the Divine Mercy Chaplet is not only a prayer, it is a vessel through which your soul is lifted toward restoration, resilience, and profound inner peace. When you realize healing was happening all along, everything in your perception of suffering and prayer begins to shift. At first, it feels as if progress is slow, fragmented, or even non-existent. You have prayed the Divine Mercy Chaplet faithfully, yet the pain lingers, the anxiety persists, and the questions remain. It seems as though God has been silent, withholding relief, or waiting for some moment that never arrives. You may have doubted, wondered if your prayers were reaching Him, or feared that healing would never come. Every struggle appears isolated, and every day a repetition of the last. Then, with reflection and continued devotion, the realization dawns. Healing was never absent. It has been unfolding quietly, layer by layer, beneath your awareness. Every tear, every whispered prayer, every moment of surrender has been a thread woven into your restoration. The chaplet has been shaping your heart, mind, and soul in ways too subtle to notice in the moment. The challenges, the delays, the silent nights, these were all part of a divine choreography, each moment preparing your spirit to receive what only God could give in His perfect timing. This awareness brings profound clarity. You look back and see patterns where before there seemed only chaos. Times when you thought you were failing, struggling, or alone are revealed as moments of unseen mercy in action. Opportunities you missed, words you did not understand, circumstances that frustrated or saddened you, they all contributed to the healing process in ways that your human mind could not recognize at the time. Each instance of persistence in prayer, each repetition of the chaplet, has been an instrument of divine transformation, unseen yet effective. The realization that healing has been occurring all along brings peace that surpasses understanding. You begin to recognize that God's work does not always follow human timelines or expectations. Healing does not always appear as a sudden miracle or dramatic change. It often manifests subtly, shaping the heart, softening fears, correcting perspectives, and infusing courage where there was none. You notice that you have grown, even if circumstances remain challenging. Strength, patience, compassion, and trust have been cultivated quietly, imperceptibly, as evidence of God's ongoing work. This insight transforms how you approach prayer and life. You begin to pray with gratitude, acknowledging that every moment, every struggle, every silent night has been part of the healing journey. You understand that mercy is not measured by external outcomes, but by internal transformation. You start to recognize your own resilience and the depth of God's faithfulness, even in times when you could not see it. The chaplet becomes not only a source of prayer, but also a reminder that every faithful effort, no matter how small, contributes to divine restoration. Ultimately, this realization cultivates enduring hope. You comprehend that healing is not a single event, but a continuous process, unfolding in layers beyond human perception. Your pain, your doubts, and your challenges have not been in vain. They have been the medium through which God's mercy has reshaped your life. Every prayer, every repetition of the Divine Mercy Chaplet, every act of surrender has been part of this unseen work. And now, looking back, you see that you were being healed all along, quietly, steadily, profoundly. This understanding fosters gratitude, trust, and a deep, abiding peace that anchors your soul in the reality of God's unwavering love.